Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta. Tuesday morning, that's December the 28th, and I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and chat room's open, and I do have the link in there to the information I want to continue to look at. We were talking about it yesterday, effects of abuse from a mentalhealth.net, www.mentalhealth.net. So that's what we're going to continue looking at today, and I'm not a counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own shows and a survivor of child abuse, and I just wanted to be one more voice. And I say this on every show. I think it's just important people know, that I'm not a qualified counselor or therapist. I'm just a person who's going through my healing journey, still working on it. Been working on it for about 4 years now. Been working on it really all my life, but really cognitively trying to heal and really have a healthy life, and really come to an understanding of what happened to me and why my behaviors were the way they were and why I was feeling the way that I was. So really that all started about 4 years ago. So I'm quite a long ways along in my healing journey. So for people who just have started on their healing journey and you're listening to this, make sure that you're safe. You're in a safe enough place to listen to my shows, because the topics of abuse are very sensitive. And people who are healing and just starting on their healing journey, they may find it very uncomfortable, and it could trigger you. You could feel bad and kind of have a bad day because of it. And you just want to make sure that you're safe and that you have maybe somebody with you who can listen to the show with you. And that way, if you do get upset, then you'll have somebody there to help you out, right? It's very important. As a survivor of child abuse, I know about all these symptoms of flashbacks and real, periods of time of depression and feeling really down or feelings of anger. I had a lot of anger. I've worked through a lot of that. And I did it on my own, and it was not easy. And I really wish, now that I would have had somebody to do that with, right? But I was always just very much not willing to reach out until about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, decided to really start reaching out slowly, right? Very slowly. And so I joined an online group support and for child abuse survivors. And I'm actually not there anymore, even though I probably could go back to the community. I just don't have time for it. But it was helpful. It was very helpful. And people, you can go on there on any of these, well, not any of them, but some of them. You can go on anonymously, so you don't even have to tell people who you really are. You can go on with a fake name, and that way you can stay very much private, and no one will really know your real name. And it's really cool because there's so many people on there who are, who've been through the same things, and they know, and they've been there, and they understand. And it's nice to have that validation. It's nice to have somebody to talk to who has been there and understands somewhat what we're going through. Can't understand the whole thing because everyone's situation is different. We're all different, and the abuse would have been different, right? And different things happening, but you can still. We all know the pain, and we all know the anguish and the suffering that goes along with being abused as a child. So, and then having to deal with it as an adult survivor, right? So, I would say just reach out. Just reach out where you can. Whether you want a counselor, or therapist, or online group support in your local area, where there are some cities that actually have and host survivor support groups, right, which is just awesome. Calgary, I don't think has very many. I did check it out, and didn't seem to be all that much local real support. So online support was kind of the best way for me to go. But it's just important to get involved with and again reach out, because we don't deserve to suffer alone. And that's why I'm doing these shows. I wanted to just be one more voice out here for people so that they would know that they're not alone and that there is help out there and that we can do this. There's too many people in front of me saying, hey, look, we've done it. You can do it. It is hard, but it is doable. So you have to listen to my shows at your own discretion. Young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to any of my shows, because there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and I just feel that children should be protected at all times. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. We're fighting to stand up for children's lives, and so, and to save children's lives, really. And so you need to get the education on how to keep yourself safe online, right? Especially when there's a chat room present. So I have a chat room here, and you have to know how to keep yourself safe in the chat room, right? Just type into your browser, internet safety, online safety for children, right? Things like this. If you're under the age of 18, learn how to protect yourself online. It's very important. And if you're, listening to my show, have someone listen to the show with you who can help you make a decision whether you should be listening or not, right? So we'll get right into this topic here. This is from www.mentalhelp.net, and we were looking at it yesterday. Actually, just started talking about this particular article. And it was written by Catherine Patricelli, and she wrote this December 15th, 2005, but it doesn't matter. The information is good. And it's called Effects of Abuse. And we won't read the whole thing over, but she was just saying that being abused does not necessarily cause psychological or medical illness to occur. She did say, however, being abused does make it much more likely that one or more psychological or medical illnesses will occur. Victimized people commonly develop emotional or psychological problems secondary to their abuse, which including anxiety disorders and various forms of depression. That's what she's written here. So we were sort of just talking about that and the fact that, I never really self-diagnosed myself, like give myself a diagnosis or whatever, because I think I have some anxiety issues and probably some PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and things like this, and who knows what else. I don't diagnose myself because I've never been diagnosed with any kind of mental illness, right? And but I've never really reached out and got any help either. So who knows what I've got. But I handle, I'm pretty good now. Like 4 years ago, I was having a lot of problems and really should have seen a therapist or a counselor, and just prior to 4 years ago, probably 4.5, 5 years ago, there was a lot of stress in my life, and it was culminated by, things that were happening in my daily life as well as the whole knowledge of being abused as a child. I had been dealing with that ever since I was a young person. I never really went into denial. I never really blocked any. I did block certain pieces of it out. The child sexual abuse, I did block some of that out. Not all of it. That's why I know what happened. But for the most part, I was pretty cognitive and but was willing to just kind of put it in the back burner and not deal with it because my mom was still living until about 15, 16 years ago. And when she died, things changed, and all of a sudden, it was no longer all about my mom, who was my main abuser. Everything was about her in the family. She really was. Both my parents were abusing us. You know what I mean? It wasn't just my dad, and it wasn't just my mom. They were both having so many problems. They were both mentally ill, and they had all kinds of issues, and they were both abused as children too, which was just a bad mix. And so they did what they did, and because my mom was still living until about 16 years ago, I was willing to put everything on the back burner to try to keep her alive and try to bring peace to her life. You know what I mean? I always was kind of hoping that she would be able to show me the love that I really needed as a child, you know what I mean, even up until the day she died. But I actually left the country just about a year before she passed away, and then went down for her funeral, and nothing had changed, and she was still as toxic as she ever was. And when she died and she actually passed away, my inner child started screaming and just raging, and it took me a year actually to even to maintain any kind of control. I was just should have had counseling at that point probably, but I had been trained that, counselors were just out to get our information and just to use us and hurt us. And I'm telling both my parents, because both my parents were mentally ill, and they did not want, they were actually, because they were arrested and brought up on child abuse charges, and they went to court and everything, and the courts actually insisted that if the children were going to remain in the home, that everyone had to have counseling, including my parents, of course, for sure. They were the ones that were supposed to get counseling in the first place for their anger management problems, for their mental illness, for everything, right? They were abusive, highly volatile, violent, abusive people. And the courts were like, well, if the children are going to stay in the home, then you have to go through a certain set of counseling, marital counseling, and anger management counseling, and everything, right? And they agreed, but they went to 2 counseling sessions, and that was it. So, they didn't get very far in that. And they continued to abuse us long after social services were out of the picture. So, it's just sad to see what happens there. If people would get help, like had my parents really gotten some help, and gotten some counseling at the time when the courts actually told them to, things would have been a lot different, and I look at that because I was just a toddler then. I was 2 years old. The rest of the siblings were all quite a bit older than me, My sister would have been 7 years old. My brother would have been 9 years old. Well, let's see, because I was 2. My sister would have been 5 years old. My brother would have been 7. Another brother would have been 10, and another brother would have been 13. And so there was teenagers and young kids in the home. There's 5 of us left in the home. 2 had already moved out. 2 of the older siblings actually moved out. So, things would have been different had my parents got some help. But they were always trained. They kind of told us our whole entire life, really, and especially growing up as children there, that, that everybody was out to get them, because my dad was schizophrenic, paranoid, schizophrenic, and my mom also had some issues with that. She was manic depressive, and my parents were always thinking that everybody was out to get them, and including the government, and because the government did come, but they went bankrupt, and we lost everything when I was a young kid, right? So my parents always had this thing where everybody was out to get them, and everything was just a problem, and they didn't want to go get counseling because they didn't trust counselors, and they thought the counselors would just hurt them and use their information and hurt them. So they brought us up believing this, right? So nobody in my family got any help. And it's really sad because 2 of my brothers killed themselves, and that's really sad. And people say, oh, well, it was just their lifestyle. One of my brothers, actually, they were both drug addicts. One was a cocaine addict, and the other one was a pill popper, popping any kind of pills he could get. I was a drug addict, too, until the age of 21, and decided that I did not want to go the route of my brothers. One of my brothers killed himself when I was 20, and it really showed me the path that I was leading on, and I thought, man, I'll be there shortly if I don't get off of this and get off of drugs and straighten my life up. So I did start working on my life at the age of 21, and it took me another 21 years just to really want to stay alive, at least another 20 years, right? So another 20 years later, I was still contemplating suicide, and, this stuff is so harsh on people that, that's why I'm doing these shows. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother. I know how hard it is for people out there, and I really wish that I would have reached out a lot sooner. And so, had I reached out and got some help a lot sooner, I would have been so much further on my healing journey, right? Instead of coming into this, in my mid-40s, right, and trying to, heal. But hey, it's better late than never. That's what I say, right? My brother, when he killed himself, he was 33 years old, and then the other one, many years later, died of a drug overdose in a shelter here in Calgary, and I wasn't living here at the time. I was down in the States, and he knew those pills would kill him eventually, right? We were not surprised when we got the phone call. I really wasn't either phone call. My brother that killed himself had been trying to kill himself for years, so it's not like it was something new. And when he finally made it, it was not a shock. It wasn't really a surprise, and I was just angry because my parents never took responsibility for anything that they did. They never took responsibility for the abuse they put on us. They never acknowledged it, and that's harsh. It's very, very harsh. So, I wish my brothers could have got some help too, right? That's what I'm saying. So I just wish everybody would just, if you have to, man, you call the crisis line. You do whatever you have to do, right, to stay alive, because there's too many survivors on the other end of this that I know personally that are saying, hey, we've been there. And look where we are now, because we're willing to take a step every day, no matter how hard that step is. And no matter how much pain we have to deal with, we are going to make it. And it's really a determination. That's what happened to me 4 years ago. I made a clear decision and a commitment to myself that I would never, ever consider or even think about suicide again, and it would not be an option for me, and that I was going to stay here and I was going to fight this and win this fight, right? So it was so huge for me to be able to do this show and to do these shows, right? Because I know where people are at, you know what I mean? And so it's harsh, and it's so incredibly sad, that this could be, mainly caused by the way that we were treated as children. And it just bothers. That's why I'm fighting to stop child abuse and, really spend as much time as I possibly can, working to stop and prevent child abuse, right? It's very important to me. And so, because we certainly didn't deserve it, that's for sure. So Catherine Patricelli here in this article goes on to say that, it can cause all kinds of problems, PTSD and whatnot. Not everyone who's abused would have these issues, like dissociative disorder, dissociative identity disorder, commonly known as multiple personality disorder. She says sexual disorders may be present, but not always, right? See, this is the issue. Not everybody's going to experience this stuff, but some people do, and I know lots of people that do. And I know myself that I do, right? And so there's lots of issues, that can result, because of the abuse. It says abuse can result in poor self-esteem, which can lead to a lack of close and trusting relationships or to body image issues, right? Particularly for sexual abuse victims. And I know all about this stuff. I mean, I hated myself. I hated my body. I hated everything about myself because both my parents were abusing me from the time I was born, verbally, physically, psychologically, emotionally, in every way. My brother was the one who was sexually abusing me, and that was at the age of 8. Now, I don't know if I was sexually abused prior to that because I don't have any recollection of being abused sexually before that. So who knows? You know what I mean? But I remember being 8 years old and my brother sexually abusing me. And the whole issue is that I thought it was my dad for so many years because my dad was sexually abusing my mother. He was raping her violently. He was a horrible man. Well, he still lives today, right? He's a rapist. And I kind of thought, well, maybe it was my dad that did that to me, right? And it didn't even, I didn't want to believe it was my brother because I loved my brother. And I hated my dad, right? Well, at least I thought I did. I actually didn't hate my parents, right? I used to say I hated my parents right to their face, right? Because I was hoping they would kill me. You know what I mean? I was actually kind of pushing for it. And I thought, hey, if they kill me, then I don't have to do the job myself. And I was 10 years old when I was thinking like that. That's the problem, right? And the issue is that they would never kill me. So I would tell them stuff like, I hate your guts. They would beat on me and they would hurt me, but they wouldn't kill me. So I got to say whatever I wanted to them, and I took a beating for it, but I didn't care. And then later on, I realized that I didn't hate my parents, and now looking back on it, I know that I loved them and, wanted them to love me back, right? And that was never going to happen because my parents were mentally ill and they were sick people. My mom was really could not love me, and she told me why, and it's because I was born out of rape. So, she said, I can't, I don't love you, you're a rape child, I did not want you. She would tell me this stuff as a child, right? And then even as a teenager, I heard it again, and as an adult, I heard it again. So it's kind of like when somebody tells you that your whole life, you kind of know where you stand, right? And it's like, well, that sucks. And so I was never going to be able to get that, to get that love that I needed and that nurturing, really, that bond with my parents from a small age, right? But I was always trying. And now as an adult with my dad living, my mom's gone, right? But my dad still lives, and he's still just as sick as he was the day that I was, those days when I was young growing up. He's a sick man. He never did get any help, and he plays a really good card. Lots of people don't realize he's mentally ill because when he's behind closed doors, that's when he allows himself to be his real self, which is somebody who has a lot of problems. You know what I mean? So out in public, he can turn it around and he can make people believe that he's just perfectly fine. But when he's by himself, that's when you will note that he is very, very sick. And so I feel bad for him because he won't get any help, and he still won't get any help. He's almost 88 years old, and he doesn't think that there's anything wrong with himself, even though he hallucinates and he has all kinds of issues. I mean, he's very sick, right? So what do you do with that? He wants me to be in his life, but he hasn't changed. And me, I'm not playing that role anymore. I'm not playing that script that my parents wrote for me anymore, right? And I'm 45, and I finally decided I'm absolutely not playing that script that anyone wrote for me when I was a child, my siblings or anything. I've only got 2 siblings left, my sister and a brother, right? And they still expect me to play this role, right? This role that I always played, which was to allow people to hurt me, to take everything that my parents gave me, just allow it to be dished out upon me, that my siblings could run me down and put me down at any time, and I'm supposed to sit there and be okay with it. One of my only brother that's living now has actually not talked to me for almost 5 years, and that's, and hates what I'm doing. He knows what I'm doing. He knows I went public and I wrote my story and I wrote the book about all of our family. And he knows what I'm doing with this, Dream Catchers for Abused Children, and as well as speaking out against abuse. And he says he hates it, and he just hates what I'm doing. Why would I care? The guy hasn't talked to me for 5 years, and he has not really been in my life since he moved out when he was 16 years old and I was born. I was born and he was already moved out of the house, I guess that year. When I was born, he was 16 years old, just turning 17. So he moved out. He was gone. He was never really part of the family because he moved to Canada. He moved around. Actually, he went around the world. He sort of went everywhere, traveling around. He was a young guy. And then he wasn't part of my life ever. So why would I care? what he thinks. You know what I mean? Like I really don't. So he wants me to play some sort of life script that he has no concept of because he wasn't in my life, right? And I'm like, you people, you have to be joking. You know what I mean? Like my immediate family is still so very much so screwed up in the head that it doesn't make any sense for me to hang around with them. And people would say, "Oh, but you have to try to restore your family. You have to try to restore this relationship with your family." And I'm like, "What relationship? Restore what?" Right? There was never any relationship there. You know what I mean? And that's the problem. And that's where I'm at today. You know, it's like it's still affecting me today because my dysfunctional family still lives, right? And as long as we're all still living, there will be the issues because my siblings are in denial. My dad is still mentally ill, and I'm on my healing journey trying to heal from this, right? So it's a huge issue, and I refuse to play along with it anymore. You know, my people, I'm working extremely hard to have a good life and to help other people mainly, and to help myself. So I'm not just working to help other people, but I'm also very much working to help myself. And so if my siblings aren't going to respect that, and my mentally ill dad, I don't expect him to because he's mentally ill and whatever, right? But my siblings, you know, if they aren't going to show me some respect and the respect that I actually deserve, I'm having nothing to do with them, right? So I've kind of cut them off. Like I've completely cut off my family, including all my nieces and nephews. I only have two nieces. I have one niece and one nephew, really, and they're cut off. Everybody's cut off. Right? Because they were never, ever there for me in the first place. And I've always been there for them. You know what I mean? But now, because I'm on my healing journey, they don't like it. They're just like, oh, look what she's doing. She's narking on the family. She's telling on Grandma and Grandpa. She's making the whole family look bad. You know, all I did was tell the truth. And, hey, the truth hurts, man. Let me tell you. The truth of knowing, you know, that the horrific stuff that went on in my home, you know, that was inflicted upon us by our parents who were very sick, you know, it's the truth. And, you know, so if the other nephews who love their grandparents can't, you know, a niece can't, you know, believe it or buy into it, that's because they weren't there. They don't know. They weren't even born yet, you know. So that's the whole issue. It's kind of, you know, I understand why they feel the way they do. But my whole thing is that I'm not going to stop my healing journey and go back to the way that I was because I don't want to kill myself. And these people would rather have me go back to the way that I was, even at the risk that I could hurt myself or that I could want to end my life, because they don't care that I was abused as a child. They really don't care that I was abused physically, verbally, psychologically, emotionally, or sexually as a child. And some, you know, many times they witnessed that stuff. Nobody, I mean, it was just me and my bro when the sexual abuse was happening, but I did tell my mom and she didn't do anything about it. But the thing is like, you know, the other stuff, they were there to witness the physical abuse, the verbal abuse, because they were being abused, my siblings, right? Not my niece and nephew, but the siblings, right? But they don't, you know, they don't want to have to deal with it. So this book is like a big, you know, it's right in their face, you know, because they're like, oh God, she's written a book and she's told the narked on our parents. My parents were already narked on. They were brought up on abuse charges. You know, it's not like the world doesn't know. You know what I mean? My parents were brought up and arrested for child abuse, right? And my brother said they should have been thrown away. They're put in jail and the key should have been thrown away. They should have been locked up and put away for life because of what they did. But, you know, they didn't do any time and they were allowed to keep us in the home and continue to abuse us. Well, isn't that just great? You know? But the whole issue is it's done. It's a done deal. You can't go back and change the past, so we have to learn how to, you know, how to heal and how to work through this stuff, right? So that's what I'm doing. So I'm on my healing journey, and you know, I have actually no support from my immediate family, but I'm not surprised because they were never there for. Nobody was ever there for anybody. You know, none of us were there for each other. The siblings, you would think with 7 siblings that we would have come together. The oldest 2 siblings pretended that they didn't even have any brothers and sisters. Like my oldest sister, the oldest, which was, you know, she was 18 years older than me. She was moved out before I was even born, right? And she was married before I was even born. She was 18 years older than me, so she actually refused to admit that she even had brothers. She says, "No, I do not acknowledge my brothers. I have 2 sisters, and that's it." She said, I refuse to acknowledge that I have brothers. So that was her thing. She was kind of, you know, she was 18 years older than me. We had no real relationship except for I used to work with her, and I used to work for her for a while and for their company. And for her and her husband, they had a company, a small business. And the thing is we weren't really all that close, but she did like me, and you know, we would have coffee and chat and stuff. But we would never chat about any family stuff because, you know, who wants to talk about, you know, like back in the old days, it was like nobody wanted to talk about what was going on in our home when we were dealing with it. You know what I mean? So we would talk about just whatever, you know. Nobody was ever dealing with anything, and nobody was trying to help anybody. She was actually really, I want to say, one of my abusers, my oldest sister, because she was always encouraging my mom to quote unquote discipline me, right? So that's the whole issue. I didn't really like my oldest sister because she was mean to her own kids. Like my two nephews that were born right after me, right after I was born, my sister was pregnant with her son when my mom was pregnant with me, right? Because there was an 18 years difference between me and them. So my sister was pregnant at the same time my mom was, right? With me. So my sister was her children were born, one of her children was born right after I was born, like a few months later. So you know, she was abusive to her children, treating them horribly, force feeding them, and my mom said she had to actually take over her two when they were small babies, her two grandsons, because my sister was force feeding them and practically killing them. And then the years of abuse that my nephews went through, they consider that discipline. They thought it was okay to be beaten on and whipped and kicked around, right? Because their parents told them that that's just the way life is and that's what's going to happen, and there was nobody to step in and say that's wrong. Now in my case, there were people that stepped in when the social workers came in, and my parents were busted on abuse charges. You know, the social workers, I believe that my oldest siblings were told that behavior was wrong, and they kind of passed that. The ones that were in the home, there was 7 children, right? I think they passed that down, and you know, that's why I knew that it was wrong, right? I knew it was completely wrong. So it's, you know, families are bizarre, the whole family dynamics, you know, and I have no desire to, if my family doesn't want to support me in my healing journey, I really have no desire to hang around with them, you know what I mean? Like, if they're not going to be there for me now, then they can forget it. I understand why they weren't there for me before, but now I can see, you know, as children, right, as young people, right, I mean, they were my abusers as well, because my family, everybody was abusing everybody in my family, right? I mean, it was horrible. And so, you know, it's like now as adults, right? Yeah, why should I take more garbage off of them just because that's the way it always was, right? So I've pretty much, you know, cut the ties with my immediate family, and I'm actually really happy about it, and it does bring me peace of mind. And people would say, "Isn't that sad?" But actually, I have more anguish being around them, and more pain in my heart being around them, and thinking about being around them than I do if I just let them go, right? It's much more easier for me to walk away, and that's sad, but sometimes you have to. If people are toxic and they're hurting you as an adult, as a 40, 50-year-old, 60-year-old siblings are still hurting you, and they're still making you feel like you were just worthless and you didn't deserve anything, and it was okay that mom beat on you, and it was okay that your brother sexually used you, you know, then do you really need to be around those kind of people, right? I mean, that's like just a life sentence with abusers, right? So that's why I'm like, no, I can choose who I want to be around. I can choose who I see. I can choose who I let into my life, right? And as adult survivors, you know, we have to make clear decisions and understand the motives behind them. And we have to be able to understand why we're doing what we're doing and take a good look at it, you know, and really think it through before we do anything, you know, rash or make these decisions, right? I take a long time to think about this. And it's not like I made this decision in a couple of minutes, you know. I wanted to make that decision a long time ago, right? I'm cutting them all off. But, you know, instead of that, I really went and thought about it. And it caused me some severe pain to think about it. Because I thought, oh, God, if I let them stay in my life, I'm going to be miserable because they are nothing but abusive to me. And they like to act like they're so good to me, but actually they're not, because they hurt me emotionally, psychologically, and verbally, right? So I'm like, why should I let my siblings continue to hurt me long after? And I'm on the journey, right? So it was a good decision for me to make, I believe, because it's in my best interest. And so, you know, but we have to make our own choices. And, you know, it's really good to get some help with this stuff. You know what I mean? I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of self-help. So, but whatever you have to do, you know, to get some help, whether you need to see a counselor, therapist, group support, online group support, whatever, reaching out to a friend who knows that, you know, you've been through this and wants to help, right? Especially if you know they're trustworthy. Otherwise, I would be very careful about that. You got to know that somebody's trustworthy before you know, let them, you know, work in your life like that, right? And especially a therapist and counselor, you want to know that they are accredited and they have all the necessary papers and degrees, right, to help you. And online group support, you can go in there and just be anonymous and talk to people. Whatever you do, get some help, reach out. And if you have to, like I said earlier in the show, you call a crisis line. That's what those people are there for. They're like you and me. They've been there. They've been through it. A lot of them. That's why they're there doing that. The pay is not very good, and a lot of them volunteer. So they're doing it because they care, right? So, I would say, man, if you get to the point where you have no one to talk to and you really need somebody to talk to, you call a crisis line, right? Get some help. So we'll continue on with this article tomorrow. We'll take another look at it, and we really didn't get very far in there because I really got off on a tangent here today. But we'll take a look at the rest of this. This is from www.mentalhealth.net. It's called Effects of Abuse by Catherine Petruccelli. So you can go there and check that out. And I find it very interesting, good information. There's all kinds of information on this website, so be sure and check it out. I'll be back on tomorrow morning, one child abuse survivor to another again, 6 o'clock a.m. I'll be on tonight on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be covering the headlines. Elizabeth Brawley, Southern Regional Director, and myself will be covering the child abuse headlines and talking about that. So that's what we'll be doing tonight. Have a great day, everybody. Take good care of yourselves and reach out. Don't ever give up. I'm telling you, never give up. That's my message, and I'm just going to keep saying it. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.